Now, for the final event of the evening. The great romantic poet Shelley said that the poet was the unacknowledged legislature of mankind. But there are few poets among us who can lay claim to that title. It takes the ability to weave words magically, to be a visionary, to have a strong social and political conscience, and to be blessed with a cliché-piercing intellect. Adrienne Rich fulfills all of those criteria for me. For years, I've thought of her as an inspiration and a complete poet. Tonight, let us rephrase Shelley. We are acknowledging one of the unacknowledged legislatures of man and womankind. The Santa Cruz County Artist of the Year, I give you Adrienne Rich.
Thank you, Morton. Thank you all. I want to thank the other poets who have read tonight. This has been very inspiring for me. And I look forward to hearing all of you on many other occasions in and out of this county. I'm going to begin with a couple of sections from an Atlas of the Difficult World, some of which I think evoke places that are familiar to us all. A dark woman, head bent, listening for something. A woman's voice, a man's voice, or voice of the freeway, night after night, metal streaming down coast, past eucalyptus, cypress, agribusiness empires, the salad bowl of the world, gur of small plains, dusting the strawberries, each berry picked by a hand in close communion, strawberry blood on the wrist, malathion in the throat, communion, the hospital at the edge of the fields, premature slipping from unsafe wombs, the labor and delivery nurse on her break watching planes dusting rows of pickers. Elsewhere, declarations are made. At the sink, rinsing strawberries flocked and gleaming fresh from market, one says, "On the pond this evening is a light finer than my mother's handkerchief, received from her mother, hemmed and initialed by the nuns in Belgium." One says, "I can lie for hours reading and listening to music, but sleep comes hard. I'd rather lie awake and read." One writes, "Mosquitoes pour through the cracks in this cabin's walls. The road in winter is often impassable. I live here so I don't have to go out and act. I'm trying to hold on to my life. It feels like nothing." One says, "I never knew from one day to the next where it was coming from. I had to make my life happen from day to day, every day an emergency. Now I have a house, a job from year to year. What does that make me?" In the writing workshop, a young man's tears wet the frugal beard he's grown to go with his poems, hoping they have redemption stored in their lines, maybe will get him home free. In the classroom, 8-year-old faces are gray. The teacher knows which children have not broken fast that day, remembers the Black Panthers spooning cereal. Within 2 miles of the Pacific, rounding this long bay, sheening the light for miles inland, floating its fog through redwood rifts and over strawberry and artichoke fields, its bottomless mind returning always to the same rocks, the same cliffs, with ever-changing words, always the same language. This is where I live now. If you had known me once, you'd still know me now, though in a different light and life. This is no place you ever knew me. But it would not surprise you to find me here, walking in fog, the sweep of the great ocean eluding me, even the curve of the bay, because, as always, I fix on the land. I am stuck to earth. What I love here is old ranches leaning seaward, low-roofed spreads between rocks, small canyons running through pitched hillsides, live oaks twisted on steepness, the eucalyptus avenue leading to the wrecked homestead, the fog-wreathed, heavy-chested cattle on their blonde hills. I drive inland over roads closed in wet weather, past shacks hunched in the canyons, roads that crawl down into darkness and wind into light, where trucks have crashed and riders of horses tangled to death with low-struck boughs. These are not the roads you knew me by, but the woman driving, walking, watching for life and death is the same. Here is a map of our country. Here is the sea of indifference glazed with salt. This is the haunted river flowing from brow to groin. We dare not taste its water. This is the desert where missiles are planted like corms. This is the breadbasket of 4 closed farms. This is the birthplace of the rockabilly boy. This is the cemetery of the poor who died for democracy. This is a battlefield from a 19th century war. The shrine is famous. This is the sea town of myth and story. When the fishing fleets went bankrupt, here is where the jobs were, on the pier, processing frozen fish sticks, hourly wages, and no shares. These are other battlefields, Centralia, Detroit. Here are the forests primeval, the copper, the silver lodes. These are the suburbs of acquiescence, silence rising fume-like from the streets. This is the capital of money and dolor, whose spires flare up through air inversions, whose bridges are crumbling, whose children are drifting blind alleys, pent between coiled rolls of razor wire. I promised to show you a map, you say, but this is a mural. Then yes, let it be. These are small distinctions. Where do we see it from is the question. And this, thank you. There are some parts of the next section that I'm going to read that I am quoting verbatim from the prison letters of George Jackson, who was imprisoned at Soledad and then later at San Quentin, and whose letters from prison were published in the early 70s under the title Soledad Brother. Soledad, feminine, solitude, loneliness, homesickness, lonely retreat, winter sun in the rose trees. An old Mexican with a white mustache prunes them back, spraying the cut branches with dormant oil. The old paper bag brown adobe walls stretch apart from the rebuilt mission in their own time. It is lonely here in the curve of the road, winding through vast brown fields, machine engraved in furrows of relentless precision. In the small chapel, Nuestra Señora de la Soledad dwells in her shallow arch, painted on either side with columns. She is in black lace, crisp as cinders, from head to foot, alone, solitary, homesick, in her lonely retreat. Outside, black olives fall and smash, littering and staining the beaten path. The gravestones of the padres awaits pressing down on the Indian artisans. It is the 6th day of another war. Across the freeway stands another structure from the other side of the mirror. It destroys the logical processes of the mind. A man's thoughts become completely disorganized, madness streaming from every throat, frustrated sounds from the bars, metallic sounds from the walls, the steel trays, iron beds bolted to the wall, the smells, the human waste. To determine how men will behave once they enter prison, it is of first importance to know that prison. From the freeway gun turrets planted like water towers in another garden, outbuildings spaced in winter sun, and the concrete mass beyond, who now writes letters deep inside that cave? If my instructor tells me that the world and its affairs are run as well as they possibly can be, that I am governed by wise and judicious men, that I am free and should be happy, and if, when I leave the instructor's presence and encounter the exact opposite, if I actually sense or see confusion, war, recession, depression, death, and decay, is it not reasonable that I should become perplexed? From 18 to 28 of his years, a young man schools himself, argues, debates, trains, lectures to himself, teaches himself Swahili, Spanish, learns 5 new words of English every day, chain smokes, reads, writes letters. In this college of force, he wrestles bitterness, self-hatred, sexual anger, cures his own nature. 7 of these years in solitary, soledad. But the significant feature of the desperate man reveals itself when he meets other desperate men, directly or vicariously, and he experiences his first kindness, someone to strain with him, to strain to see him as he strains to see himself, someone to understand, someone to accept the regard, the love that desperation forces into hiding. Those feelings that find no expression in desperate times store themselves up in great abundance, ripen, strengthen, and strain the walls of their repository to the utmost. Where the kindred spirit touches this wall, it crumbles. No one responds to kindness. No one is more sensitive to it than the desperate man. And this is the last section of that poem. I know you are reading this poem late before leaving your office of the one intense yellow lamp spot and the darkening window, in the lassitude of a building faded to quiet long after rush hour. I know you are reading this poem, standing up in a bookstore far from the ocean on a gray day of early spring, faint flakes driven across the plains, enormous spaces around you. I know you are reading this poem in a room where too much has happened for you to bear, where the bedclothes lie in stagnant coils on the bed, and the open valise speaks of flight, but you cannot leave yet. I know you are reading this poem as the underground train loses momentum, and before running up the stairs toward a new kind of love your life has never allowed. I know you are reading this poem by the light of the television screen where soundless images jerk and slide while you wait for the newscast from the Intifada. I know you are reading this poem in a waiting room of eyes met and unmeeting, of identity with strangers. I know you are reading this poem by fluorescent light, in the boredom and fatigue of the young who are counted out, count themselves out at too early an age. I know you are reading this poem through your failing sight, the thick lens enlarging these letters beyond all meaning, yet you read on because even the alphabet is precious. I know you are reading this poem as you pace beside the stove, warming milk, a crying child on your shoulder, a book in your hand, because life is short and you too are thirsty. I know you are reading this poem which is not in your language, guessing at some words while others keep you reading, and I want to know which words they are. I know you are reading this poem listening for something, torn between bitterness and hope, turning back once again to the task you cannot refuse. I know you are reading this poem because there is nothing else left to read, there where you have landed, stripped as you are. Well, today is Earth Day, and so I thought I would read this poem for Earth Day. It's about my neighborhood. And it's called Walking Down the Road. On a clear night in Live Oak, you can see the stars glittering low as from the deck of a frigate. In Live Oak, without pavements, you can walk the fronts of old homesteads, past tattered palms, original rose bushes, thick walnut trees, ghosts of the live oak groves the white men cleared. On a night like this, the old California thickens and bends. The Baja streams out like lava melt. We are no longer the United States. We're a lost piece of Mexico, maybe dreaming the destruction of the Indians, reading the headlines, how the gringos marched into Mexico City, forcing California into the hand of manifest destiny, law following greed. And the pale lies trapped in the flickering boxes here in Live Oak tonight, they too follow. One thing follows on another, that is time. Carmel in its death-infested prettiness, thousands of skeletons stacked in the Camposanto, the spring fouled by the pickaxe, the flag dragged onto the moon, the crystal goblet smashed, grains of the universe flashing their angry tears here in Live Oak. I was very struck by many of the poems read tonight. Elva Sanchez's poem about the angel of fear particularly struck me because I have been writing a lot of poems and doing a lot of thinking and reading and talking with friends, trying to grasp what indeed is happening in our country at this time. And this is a series of short poems called Then or Now. And it has an epigraph, but the epigraph is just the voice of the poet saying, "Is it necessary for me to write obliquely about the situation? Is that what you would have me do?" And the first few poems in this sequence draw on my reading of the letters of the Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, written both before and after World War II to her beloved professor Karl Jaspers. Karl Jaspers' wife was Jewish, and for that reason he was forced to flee Germany and lived in Switzerland during the war. Hannah Arendt emigrated to the United States. And the correspondence really begins when they reconnect after the war and are trying to tell each other what has happened in the interim. So this is called Food Packages 1947. Powdered milk, chocolate bars, canned fruit, tea, salamis, aspirin. 4 packages a month to her old professor in Heidelberg and his Jewish wife. Europe is trying to revive an intellectual life, and the widow of the great sociologist needs flour. Europe is trying to revive with the Jews somewhere else. The young ex-philosopher tries to feed her teachers all the way from New York with orders for butter from Denmark, sending dispatches into the fog of the European spirit. I am no longer German. I am a Jew, and the German language was once my home. And this is called Innocence, 1945. The beauty of it was the guilt. It entered us quick schnapps, forked tongue of ice. The guilt made us feel innocent again. We had done nothing while some extreme measures were taken. We drifted. In the Snow Queen's huge ballroom, had dreamed of the whole world and a new pair of skates. But we had suffered too. The miracle was, felt nothing, felt we had done nothing, nothing to do, felt free. And we had suffered too. It was that freedom we craved, cold needle in the bloodstream. Guilt, after all, was a feeling. Sunset, December 1993. Dangerous, of course, to draw parallels, yet more dangerous to write as if there were a steady course, we and our poems protected, the individual life protected, poems and ideas gliding in midair, innocent. I walked out on the deck and every board was luminous with cold dew. It could freeze tonight. Each board is different, of course, but each does gleam wet under a complicated sky, mounds of swollen ink, heavy gray unloading up the coast, a rainbow suddenly and casually unfolding its span. Dangerous not to think how the earth still was in places, while the chimneys shuddered with the first dischargements. Deportations. It's happened already while we were still searching for patterns. A turn of the head toward a long horizontal window overlooking the city to see people being taken, neighbors, vendors, paramedicals, hurried from their porches, their tomato stalls, their auto mechanic arguments, and children from schoolyards. There are far more of the takers away than the taken at this point anyway. Then, dream cut, our house. 4 men walk through the unlatched door, one in light summer wool and silken tie, one in work clothes browned with blood, one with open shirt, a thin thong necklace hasped with silver around his neck, one in shorts, naked, up from the navel. And they have come for us, 2 of us and 4 of them. And I think perhaps they are still human. And I ask them, when do you think this all began? As if trying to distract them from their purpose, as if trying to appeal to a common bond, as if one of them might be you, as if I were practicing for something yet to come. And now, as you read these poems, you whose eyes and hands I love, you whose mouth and eyes I love, you whose words and minds I love, don't think I was trying to state a case or construct a scenery. I tried to listen to the public voice of our time, tried to survey our public space as best I could, tried to remember and stay faithful to details, note precisely how the air moved and where the clock's hands stood and who was in charge of definitions and who stood by receiving them when the name of compassion was changed to the name of guilt, when to feel with a human stranger was declared obsolete. That's from a book that's coming out in September, which is titled Dark Fields of the Republic. And I'm going to read one other poem from that book and then one last short poem. This is called Sending Love. And it's a serious poem, and I had a lot of fun writing it. Sending love. Voice from the grain of the forest bought and condemned, sketched bond in the rock mass, the earthquake sought and through. Sending love, Molly sends it, Ivan sends it, Kaori sends it to Brian, Irina sends it on pale green aerograms, Abena sends it to Charlie and to Josephine, Arturo sends it, Naomi sends it, Lourdes sends it to Nawal, Walter sends it to Arlene, Abib sends it, Vashti floats it to Ekbal in a paper plane. Bored in the meeting, on a postcard, Yoel scribbles it to Gerhard. Reza, on his email, finds it waiting from Patricia. Mario and Elsie send it to Francisco. Carolina sends it monthly, home with a money order. June seals it with a kiss to Dahlia. May sends it. Montserrat scrawls it to Faiz on a memo. Lenny wires it with roses to Lou, who takes it on his whispery breath. Julia sends it loud and clear. Dagmar brails it to Maureen. Maria Cristina sends it. Mina and Moshe send it. Patrick and Max are always sending it back and forth. And even Shirley, even George are found late after closing, sending it. Wait, there's more. Sending love is harmless, doesn't bind you, can't make you sick. Sending love's expected, precipitous, and wary. Sending love can be carefree. Joaquin knew it, Era knows it. Sending love without heart, well, people do that daily. Terence, years ago, closed the window, wordless. Grace, who always laughed, is leaning her cheek against bulletproof glass, her tears enlarged like scars on a planet. Vivian hangs her raincoat on a hook, turns to the classroom, her love entirely there, supreme. Victor fixes his lens on disappearing faces, caught now, or who will ever see them again. And finally, I'll read this poem called Dreamwood. In the old, scratched, cheap wood of the typing stand, there is a landscape veined which only a child can see, or the child's older self, a woman dreaming when she should be typing the last report of the day. If this were a map, she thinks, a map laid down to memorize because she might be walking it, it shows ridge upon ridge fading into hazed desert, here and there a sign of aquifers and one possible watering hole. If this were a map, it would be the map of the last age of her life, not a map of choices, but a map of variations on the one great choice. It would be the map by which she could see the end of touristic choices, of distances blued and purpled by romance, by which she would recognize that poetry isn't revolution, but a way of knowing why it must come. If this cheap, mass-produced wooden stand from the Brooklyn Union Gas Co., mass-produced yet durable, being here now, is what it is, yet a dream map, so obdurate, so plain, she thinks the material and the dream can join, and that is the poem, and that is the late report. Thank you.
Tonight we have been graced by the startling power of language to bring culture alive, to greet us deeply, to heal the soul. We are blessed to have Adrienne Rich as a member of our community, a deeply generous member of our community, and to have her poetry in our lives. Thank you to the Santa Cruz County Arts Commission and to all the staff of the County Parks Department, Open Spaces, and Cultural Services. And to you, thank you for being such a fine audience. In just a few minutes, the poets will come out to the lobby, and please greet them. Thank you and good night.